Why are we here? Well, we're here because we have this massive mental health crisis, which is getting worse by the day. And you can see these terrible statistics here for Australia. And these are pre-COVID stats. 1 in 5 Australian adults with a mental illness, but that is expected to have increased radically over the last 2 to 3 years. You can see there that 4 out of 5 Australians now say they have poor mental health coming out of the pandemic, and 1 in 7 Australians on antidepressants, second highest antidepressant use of any OECD nation. And children as young as 4 years old being prescribed psychiatric medications. 1 in 2 of us expected to have a mental illness in our lifetimes. The incidence for mental illness is far higher in certain parts of the population, like veterans and first responders. And we're seeing this terrible impact on carers and sufferers, leading to unemployment, suicide, and homelessness, with a huge cost to the government for mental illness and suicide to the Australian economy and society. The elephant in the room for the past 50 years is the lack of innovation in treatments for mental illness. We talk about creating new access pathways, training new psychologists, new psychiatrists and therapists to treat the increasing number of people demanding treatment. But in actual fact, if we can't get to the root cause of a person's suffering, they will not get well and they cannot get out of the system. So we need to get to the cause, and that's why we're in the business of psychedelic assisted therapies. So unfortunately, I think those of us who are familiar with the field know that in the case of existing treatments, depression only leads to a very small amount of remission, about 30 to 35% with current treatments like antidepressants with significant side effects. And post-traumatic stress disorder remission rates as low as 5 to 10%. So we're a charity founded by my husband and I, who've set up 6 charities, and our goal is to expand the treatment options through safe and effective psychedelic assisted therapies being made accessible and affordable to all Australians in need, that they become an integral part of our mental health system, a known and recognised treatment that is suitable for specific patients and that lead to high remission rates. The remarkable thing about these treatments is that they only require 2 to 3 dose sessions, in contrast to often daily treatments with an antidepressant, ongoing psychotherapy, often for a person's entire lifetime. So these treatments are curative, not palliative. They're very safe in medically controlled environments and they're non-addictive. Both have been granted breakthrough therapy designation by the US regulators, which is a very rare designation only given to medicines that could be vastly superior to existing treatments. What happens when you're under the influence, particularly of psilocybin, is you have an altered neural connectivity. So you have increased neural connectivity, but bypassing of the default mode network. The default mode network of our brain is what keeps us defaulting and stuck in rigid thought patterns like I'm not good enough, things won't work out for me, no one likes me, these sort of repetitive ruminations. You can see how that looks on these representations of fMRI scans. On the right, you see a brain that is depressed, that is not functioning particularly well, very, very stuck thought loops going around in those ruminating loops of thoughts, whereas on the left you have the ingestion of the psilocybin, this massive neurogenesis, increased neuroplasticity, connection with self, others, and the planet. You can see that amazing connectivity. And most mental illness is characterized by a sense of disconnection, of being out of the loop, of not feeling a sense of belonging, a sense of social isolation, exclusion. So it's amazing to give people the gift of feeling connected through these medicines. And it's interesting to note that on both these representations of fMRIs, there's the exact same number of dots and lines. It's just that one particular brain is functioning really effectively. The other one is not functioning very effectively. It's from that place of neural connectivity, this massive neural connectivity, that a skilled therapist can work with a patient to have a real window of opportunity for that patient to be able to set new patterns of thought and behaviours in their life, their work, their relationships, so that they can move forwards. And they become an active agent for their own healing rather than just taking a daily medication. So the big news for Australia is that, yes, we did manage to reschedule psilocybin and MDMA for medical use by authorised prescribers from July 1st this year. This is a very historic rescheduling decision, which I'm proud to say my husband and I and all of our team at Mind Medicine Australia and all our advisory panel and everyone who is tens of thousands of Australians made that happen. And we cannot thank everyone from the bottom of our hearts for actually inspiring Australia to lead as the first nation to reschedule these medicines in this way. It's also important to note that this whole field is emerging very fast. We're seeing, these treatments now being made available for dementia, for addictions, for eating disorders, and a whole range of other conditions. We also unlocked $15 million worth of grants for clinical trials, and we're seeing many states in the US now legalizing use of these medicines for therapeutic use as well. You can see here some of the amazing headlines that occurred after that announcement around the world and still occurring. And Mind Medicine Australia's strategy, which has always been to build the ecosystem through events like these, awareness and knowledge building, professional development like our CPAT course, engagement with university partners, and looking at the clinical, ethical and legal frameworks needed to support these treatments around the world. Tim Ferriss was the guy who originally got me into this, so I always feel it's appropriate to quote him. And he said he sees the next 5 years as a golden window to support this field to create massive impact. And we encourage you all to support us and Sisters in Psychedelics. We're all doing very important work, and all the other organisations around the world who are being courageous and leading in this field despite resistance. And here's some of the ways you can help. Nicole, you could maybe like to just briefly talk about these.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, so obviously there's lots of ways that we'd encourage people that are interested in this work to support us. And one of the easiest ways is to start talking, and that's what we're doing as a collective this morning and evening if you're overseas. Talk and share, communicate, talk to your politicians, talk to your neighbours, talk to your friends, that sort of thing.
Talk to everyone.
Yeah, everyone possible. We also, as a small charity, as Tania mentioned, we rely on donations and support. So we'd love to sort of have, if anyone's interested in helping share, we'd love to take some of your finances to help run this amazing organisation.
And not only for that reason, but we have this wonderful patient support fund that we've just set up to enable patients who can't afford these treatments, and there will be people who can't afford these treatments, especially while the medicines are unregistered, to have access to these treatments. So our patient support fund is a way you can donate to Mind Medicine Australia, and all of your money, 100% of it, will go to supporting those patients. And we just welcome small and large donations. So please give generously. We can't do this alone. Thank you, Nicole. Anything else you want to mention about how you can help?
Not at the moment.
No, all good?
Yeah, great.
Excellent. And this is our CPAT course, folks, one of the world's leading courses with a wonderful faculty. We're taking registrations at the moment for the July intakes. And here's some lovely merchandise. You can get cards and Australia's first healing book of stories, wonderful T-shirts and other goodies. And here's some upcoming wonderful webinars we have. So next week we have Dr. Robin Carhart-Harris, one of the leaders in this field, then Rick Doblin, Reid Robertson, Ronald Siegel, Jim Fadiman, Philip Wilson, and many others coming up as well. So I think we'll stop the sharing there, and we'll ask Dana and Bea to introduce themselves and what brought them into this field. So welcome, Dana and Bea, and tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Hi, Tania, and the rest of the crew here on the webinar today. Thank you so much to start with. We're really honored to be here along with that roster that you just showed of such esteemed leaders in the psychedelic space. And also congratulations to Mind Medicine Australia and to Australia for being a global leader in this rescheduling of these medicines that are so needed for all of our mental health. So thank you so much for having us here today. So I'm Dana Harvey. I am a co-founder of Sisters in Psychedelics, along with my soul sister B. And the way that I got into this realm of work in the psychedelic industry as it is now is actually by through a corporate career in global communications for new industries and emerging technologies. So it made sense from the corporate side for me to be recruited into the field of psychedelics as it really sort of rose up in this renaissance to be an industry once again. So I came into the industry as CCO and head of investor relations for one of the leading publicly traded companies. Many of you here might know of Numinous. And I did that for a while. It was a beautiful opportunity for me to really marry together my own knowledge of the transformation of psychedelic medicines with the history, with the politics, with the science, with the research. And to really feel like I was making a difference in the education and the destigmatization of these medicines for the world. However, I also had the opportunity to undergo some psychedelic assisted therapy myself and did some really deep work on myself and came to the realization that I needed to resign, basically. I needed to come out of the realm of working so much in my head and to really work from my heart. So my passion in my career in such new technologies, new industries, is that they were very male-dominated industries. I was always a minority. I always had a real passion for supporting, promoting, elevating, coaching, mentoring women. And I wanted to keep doing that and to keep working in the area of plant medicines because I understand, I know firsthand, and I'm such an advocate for the good that these medicines can do in our world. But I needed to do it in a very different way. So I did leave, I did resign from my position. I embarked into some really deep training, apprenticing, learning, researching, learning how to hold space for people who were using these medicines and cultivating supportive communities, because I think in this space that community, sisterhood in this case, is really, really important as we gain new levels of consciousness, as we go into areas as yet unexplored for many of us. So I was traveling along, doing that under the brand of the Flourish Academy, when I had the fortune to collide with my co-founder and now soul sister, B Chan. And B, I'll turn it over to you to carry on the story from there.
Sounds good. Thanks, Dana. Tania, Nicole, and team definitely echo all the things that Dana had said. And congratulations to Australia and Mind Medicine Australia on all the efforts and achievements that you've done to date. I'll share a little bit about myself as well. And then that's probably a good segue into what is Sisters in Psychedelics? What do we do and who do we serve and all that good stuff? And so I'm B. And I'm here in Vancouver, Canada, and very similar to Dana, I had that corporate career and a lot shorter though, 7 years or so. And I came to the, gradual understanding or realization of, financial success didn't really equal to happiness. So I had all this stuff that I thought would, lift me out of, a funk, I would say. And in addition to that, also being a woman in corporate and also a visible minority, it definitely felt like any kind of, I would say like corporate Canada or those type of environments are being controlled by, older white males. And so not having that, I guess, control that I needed or that I wanted in order to, make my own path in the world, I got really disillusioned really quick. And so what happened at the end of that 7 years was I one day quit my job and I bought a one-way ticket to Asia. And that was about 4 years ago. So what happened in those 4 years to date was really doing a lot of soul searching, doing a lot of traveling, which means self-development, self-exploration. And I kind of fell into this group of digital nomads and entrepreneurs, remote entrepreneurs, like independent location people who were also very spiritual and also pro plant medicine and psychedelics. So they were the ones who introduced me to this world here. Now, fast forward a couple years, COVID hits, and I find myself traveling to Mexico, of all places, because that was one of the only countries that was still open. You didn't need to have any quarantine or any testing upon arrival. And when I was there over the course of, I would say like 9 months off and on, I dove in really deep with plant medicine in terms of going to group ceremonies, really understanding and learning the safe, intentional usage of psychedelics. What is safe and safety, set and setting, safety, dosage, and setting intentions, and all that good stuff. And so when it was time to come back home to Vancouver, I was really searching for that psychedelic focused community for women. And when I didn't find that, I found Dana instead. And we both just kind of thought to ourselves, hey, there must be more people than just the two of us looking for this. And so what we did was we threw up an event on Meetup. And last November, well, 2 Novembers ago, 2021, we had 15 women, all strangers, come over to my apartment for a potluck dinner. And all night long, we just laughed and cried as we shared our stories of healing transformation. So since then, it's really been taken a life on its own. I would say for the first 6 months or so, we basically just incubated, right? We treated it more as a casual hobby type thing. We'll meet once a month, we'll get together, we'll bond, we'll share stories, we'll connect. But it quickly grew into something way bigger than we thought it would. So in September of last year, well, let me start back in terms of an actual chronological timeline. We were the first ones in Vancouver back in March of 2022 to offer a women's only integration circle in person here in Vancouver. We also then started doing a lot more events and whatnot virtually. So we were offering sharing circles for BIPOC individuals, professionals that work in the field. Later on, we had one for men as well. And that kind of slowly snowballed into our inaugural Sisters in Psychedelics Summit that we had in September of last year. That was a one-day event where we platformed 33 all women speakers, and they talked about a variety of topics from medicine women to how to run a business in the psychedelic world to physicians that work out in the field and their findings and so on and so forth. And so that one-day event was about 150 people in attendance, about 800 who signed up for our live stream. And fast forward to today, we celebrated our 1-year anniversary in November of last year. We also launched into different chapters in Seattle, Calgary. We'll be launching into Los Angeles in the next couple of months. And we are just gearing up right now for our 2nd annual SIP Summit, which is expanded to over 3 days and with deep dive workshops and connection ceremony. And a really interesting for myself actually would be a Soul Sister of the Year award that we are piloting this year. So yeah. Did I miss anything, Dana? Anything to add?
No, I think you covered that very well. Yes.
Perfect. Tania, I think you're on mute.
Oh, yes. No, it's so exciting what you two are doing. Thank you so much. It's beautiful. Just before we continue, I've got a few questions that I want to ask you ladies, but if any of you've got questions, anything to do with women and psychedelics or any other questions about mind medicine or sisters and psychedelics or anything like that, please post them in the chat, and we will we'll come to them throughout this session. I also just wanted to mention a little bit about what we're doing in terms of supporting women in the world of psychedelics ourselves. So Mind Medicine Australia has a number of women working for it, including Nicole, who you can see here, who's one of our key managers. And we also have other wonderful people on our board and our advisory panel and so on. But particularly with our certificate in psychedelic assisted therapies. We've just made a significant announcement that Dr. Geeta Vaid, who's a leading psychiatrist in New York, is coming on board as the international director of our certificate in psychedelic assisted therapies, which is very exciting. And we also have Dr. Lauren McDonald from Imperial College in London joining our faculty, and quite a few other women as well. So it's extremely exciting. And if you watch the space, you'll see that we'll be adding a lot more women to our faculty shortly as well. And it really is wonderful to see some of these extraordinary clinicians and others who are leading in this field around the world. So we really welcome those of you who, if we can just have our cameras on and see how many people on this call, just pop your cameras on, everyone, who is a therapist. Wonderful. And we celebrate these extraordinary therapists. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing in the world. It's extraordinary, and our heart goes out to you. There's so much suffering in the world, and it's wonderful that we are starting to get these incredible tools into your hands so that you can heal your patients more quickly and more effectively. So thank you for all the work you do in the world. We salute you all. So moving on now, Dana and B, I guess, what do we mean by sisterhood in the psychedelic space? Why do you think that's something that's so important right now?
Thank you, Tania. Really good question. I think I'll start just by, letting you know that the mission of Sisters in Psychedelics is to celebrate, elevate, educate, and include women in the psychedelic ecosystem. So our efforts go into everything from creating safe spaces for women to come together in sacred circle, as we have done since the beginning of time. And, particularly in the world of plant medicine, we often need spaces where we can be open and vulnerable without fear of judgment or repercussion. Some of the darker side of psychedelic work are, of course, ethical breaches, often positions of power, which maybe males in power. And so just having these safe spaces for women is one of the really important reasons why we have Sisters in Psychedelics. Also, belonging. There's a beautiful level of intimacy and support in community with others who understand firsthand our unique physical, emotional, spiritual, and psychedelic experiences as women. That is, I think, particularly important at this point in time when research has not really been conducted into the effects of psychedelics, particularly on women in these realms in their lives. So we need our anecdotal stories, and we need the support of our sisters. And finally, I would say that for strength, together, we can effect changes to policy, to research, to ethics, and to leadership to ensure that women's perspectives and women's voices are heard and considered as psychedelics continue to evolve as an industry. Is there anything, B, that you want to add to that?
I think that was so well spoken. One thing that I would add is, there is just some sort of magic when you put women together in a room. That doesn't happen when it is mixed genders or when there's other people involved as well. I think definitely that safety, that vulnerability starts to come out because there's that trust. And also, Tania, I remember having a conversation with you about this last week about, there's kind of two sides to the coin, right? I think a lot of women, we tend to, what's the word? Over accommodate or like self-sacrifice compared to men. And so when you're in an environment that really encourages you to not do that, to really stand in your strength and to show up and step up, there's a huge difference. Yeah.
Thank you. And I mean, given there is at least one man on this call that I can see, but, and I feel like that, it's really important to have these sorts of conversations with men present. And how can men support women more in the psychedelic movement? I mean, that's obviously very important. It's not just women backing women. We all need men backing women, women backing men. I mean, it's we all need to support one another to create a really healthy ecosystem, in my opinion.
100%. One of the quotes that I heard the other day was the rise of women is not about the fall of men.
Mm-hmm.
So that's exactly the right question. What role can men play in lifting up women?
Mm-hmm.
And I think one, just being in conversations like this, and because they don't have the feminine experience every day in their everyday life, hearing from us, from these anecdotal stories about our own personal experiences, about, you know, certain things that we face on a day-to-day basis. Like, for example, this topic I've debated with many of my guy friends is, you know, late at night, you're alone, you're walking down the street to go home, and you see somebody else on the other side, you see somebody crossing, about to cross you. What would you do? And then I think for most of my girlfriends anyways, we would actually cross the street to the other side where there's nobody else. Meanwhile, for men, like, they don't even bat an eye about it. There's like nothing for you to be aware of in that situation. So even just little nuances like that to shed light on that, I think it's doing something, is helping.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I would
want to, sorry, go ahead.
Tanya, that you know, that is one of the reasons why Sisters in Psychedelics Summit is open to all genders. It elevates women by uniquely being the only psychedelic conference that features 100% women speakers. But at least 30% of our audience last year was other genders, and we're hoping for even more this year. And one thing I would add too is what can men do to help us in this realm? I would really love to see men advocating for research to be done that differentiates between men and women in the psychedelic space, because we know that so many of the clinical diagnoses that psychedelics are being used for are predominant in women, and also often caused by hormonal changes. And that just hasn't been studied. And I think it's just a really prime area for research dollars to go into.
Especially, you know, postpartum, and you know, there's a whole lot of areas that could be investigated. I agree with you, and I think there is emerging interest in that space too. So, other things that people can do on this call, like how can more women get involved at a leadership level? What are some of the career paths? I mean, obviously there's all sorts of career paths in the clinical area, because there's a lot of clinicians who are women, but what other career paths can we see? What can people do so that more women's voices are heard at the psychedelic table globally? That sort of thing. So I guess what would be really good though is also to look at any questions, if there are any. There's usually lots of questions. Come on, everyone. This is another thing I think that I would say about any women's event, or probably one of my greatest tips is that as women, we need to find our voice. And that means not just our singing voice, though I am a singer, but that means our speaking voice, and not just our speaking voice, but our creative voice, our voice of meaning and purpose. So when we find more of our voice, and we can ask questions, and we can raise our voice to ask questions as women, we get heard, we get seen, we get heard, and we need to use our full voice, not just a little voice, but our full voice, the full voice of our human instrument, our body, to be fully embodied, and to use our voice to ask for what we need in life. So if we want a leadership role, we need to ask for it. It's not just going to happen. If we want someone to donate to our charity, we need to ask for it, and it won't just happen. So we need to make those asks in an embodied sort of way, so that we are heard and we are seen when we make those asks. So I'm asking you now, all of you, to ask some questions, and we'll be very thrilled to answer them. There's a question here from Alicia who says, do we know a rough cost of how much psychedelic assisted therapy may cost? So the fact of that, Alicia, is that is changing all the time. So in Australia, as we secure medicines, and you will note that those of you who've been watching our media releases will note that we just made a large announcement in the last few days about a supply agreement for bringing psilocybin and MDMA into Australia, in fact, from a Canadian partnership that we have developed. Another Canadian partnership. We have this lovely one with Sisters in Psychedelics, and this other one with Optimi. And that is going to enable us to ensure that the cost of the medicines in Australia are kept as low as possible. And that is our goal as a charity. We don't have any intention of making money, of ever profiting from the work that we're doing with this charity. And so it really is exciting that these medicines are able to come into Australia at an affordable price. And we want to make sure that the therapies are also kept affordable. So that's why we're training as many clinicians and therapists as possible so that they can form multidisciplinary teams and that we can look at effective and efficient ways that patients can be treated to keep the costs as affordable as possible. But also, Alesia, that is why we're setting up a patient support fund, or have set it up, so that people who can't afford these treatments in full or in part can be supported. But that relies on everyone's generosity, and it's a circle of reciprocity that I always encourage, that, you know, if we're more fortunate than someone else, we give as much as we can. When we help them, they start to help others. So by helping those less fortunate, they find their voice and they can start to help others. And I've seen this happen in many, many of my charities, and I know that can work. So I encourage you all to give whatever you can to support those who cannot. There's a question here from Eloise who says, are there any chapters of Sisters in Psychedelics in Queensland, Australia? Well, not yet, but we do have chapters of Mind Medicine Australia all over Australia, Eloise. And if you're not a member of, I'm not sure how many chapters we have in Queensland, but we certainly do have a Brisbane chapter and, you know, a big Queensland chapter. So please do reach out to us. Nicole, if you could put in a link in the chat to the chapters so people can sign up, that'd be lovely. And then we've got a question here from...
Oh, Tania, I'll just say that B also did put a link in for Sisters in Psychedelics around that question, which is an opportunity to apply to be a chapter lead or to express your interest. I think we have about 48 chapter leaders that have put up their hands all around the world. We already have had some interest from Australia, and we're launching our third chapter in Los Angeles this March, and new chapters will be coming throughout the year. So yeah, please do submit your interest if you might like to head up a Sisters in Psychedelics Summit or chapter, and stay tuned. And just personally for me, I am actually an Australian citizen. I raised my kids there. I can't wait to have chapters in Australia.
Well, thank you, Dana. It might actually make sense, though, given that it's not a huge population here, for us to think about how we can actually partner on those chapters with our chapters.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, there can be lots and lots of different chapters, but if they come together, they're more powerful than the sum of their parts. So, Nicole, if you could put a note to Scott that we have a conversation with Dana about how we can form combined Sisters in Psychedelics and Mind Medicine chapters in Australia. Emily, you have your hand up. Is that a question? Okay, well.
Yes, I was happy to share my voice, if you can hear me.
We love your voice. Thank you.
Okay, good. Good morning. Hello, everybody. I'm calling from North Queensland, Cairns. I just had a question to share, and quite a vulnerable one. I've only just actually begun my psychology degree at the age of 35. I've just started now.
Congratulations.
But, thank you. And what feels relevant for me right now is I've come through myself a severe eating disorder with psychedelics. That's what's brought me to this degree now. And for me, in this beautiful conversation, it's like a vulnerability for me now as a student, when I am with my 200 or 300 peers. I sort of personally, I understand that this force is coming through across the world, but obviously in the academic perspective, that as a student now and my sort of peers, the feeling I have is a sense of fear to sort of come out with, and obviously that's just like, I'm personally not sort of feeling comfortable to be like, yeah, well, you know, psychedelics have had benefit in this way for me. But I don't know, it's just like what I'm more curious as to how potentially, as the obviously clinical uprise is happening, yeah, how can maybe me or us as students start to, we are going to be affecting, you know, what's coming through, and if that sort of makes sense. So it's like, yeah, I'm just a little bit confused how or where my role is maybe in this change, because I am fearful about that in some ways, if that makes sense. I don't know, just any insight or opinions, like maybe if somebody else is experiencing that, maybe somebody else is a student and has also come into these sort of roles potentially from an experiential basis first, as opposed to a clinical or academic one, which I understand I would say probably most of the world's population is really starting to come from that angle.
Dana, did you want to comment or B?
Sure, Emily, thank you so much for the work that you're doing and for taking that personal story and changing it into something that you can help other people in the world with. I think we need that so much. And I think with all the stigmatization that around psychedelics that we're just starting to break down, and the lack of research, particularly around women-specific issues or women-dominant issues such as eating disorders, what we are really relying on to educate people and to break down those stigmas is our personal stories and is our anecdotal stories. And this is where I just really suggest that you do find communities that can support you in that vulnerability and give you the wind beneath your wings to go out there and to speak about it and to tell people, because that's exactly what's going to affect change in our world, bring more people to know the medicine and to have beautiful results like you've had.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What I'll add there is, you know, if the fear of, you know, coming out of the psychedelic closet and, you know, putting your name and face on everything is too much, definitely look into your local psychedelic society or like, you know, student clubs that you might have on campus. For example, at the University of British Columbia, there's actually a UBC Student Psychedelics Club that you can, you know, find your community and share learnings and
Or our
stories.
chapter B. Our chapter is very supportive. Where are you based, Emily?
In Cairns.
Oh, in Cairns, yeah, that's right. We actually have we used to have a very strong chapter there, and I think it's reforming at the moment. So you could actually help with that. And
yeah, beautiful.
so Nicole, if you could write Emily a little note with Scott's email, or put Scott's email in the chat, then Emily, you could reach out and sorry,
Yeah,
B,
for sure.
did you want to add anything else there, B, though?
Oh, the last thing I was going to say is, like, I don't know the Australian landscape as much, but in the US and in Canada, there are, you know, university level research studies, clinical trials and whatnot that's always looking for people to, you know, get involved in that. So perhaps that's also another way that you can lend your support and lend your voice to.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, that certainly gives me a few different angles to strengthen myself in, so that I can be part of this change, which inevitably will be me as a practitioner.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, Emily, too, is like when you start speaking about being involved in these therapies and your interest with these therapies, it is amazing how you might think that you might project that people are going to say these things, but actually a lot of people are transfixed and engaged as soon as you start to talk about it, because they've been thinking about it themselves or have done it themselves and are too afraid to talk about it themselves. So by you becoming a voice for that, you then open up their voice as well and give them the courage to speak about their own experiences and their own need for different treatments as well, and so on.
Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. We're all feeling the same thing. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. So I'm just looking at some more questions here. So we have, thanks, darling. Eloise asking, do we know what environment we will be able to provide psychedelic assisted therapy in once certified hospital environment, private settings? So Eloise, in Australia at the moment, that will be clinical or hospital settings. So these treatments will never take place in the privacy of someone's home. They can never take the medicines home. So they're under the supervision of psychiatrists who will screen and prescribe these treatments, and then trained therapists will sit with the patient as per, what has happened in all the trials so far. VM says to everyone, how do we know who, where will find which psychiatrists are going to prescribe as per the ruling on July the 1st? So there's a whole list of psychiatrists being put together at the moment. Many of them have approached us, or we know them. There's clinical groups who are working on what they'll need to get authorised prescriber status. So if you reach out to us, that's all part of the process that we're working on at the moment, along with medicine supplies and other clinical types of rollouts and so on. And of course, our patient support fund that I mentioned earlier. Other questions? Let me have a look.
Tania, I see Myrna has her hand up, waiting patiently.
Myrna, yes, Myrna, please ask your question.
So I just thought I'd come in to try and not only support Emily, but take her to the total opposite extreme. So as Emily's just beginning her career, I'm 72 and definitely am been a psychotherapist and clinical psychologist now since 1976. So it's 1986, sorry. And so I wanted to find out, I'm very interested in doing the training, but almost my own view is I shouldn't apply because I'm too old. So I wanted to ask you directly, what is the possibility of doing the training, even though I've got my age?
Yeah, I think you wrote us an email, didn't you?
Not yet. I haven't.
Oh, okay. Someone else very similar to you did. So, we welcome people who have this vast experience. You certainly don't look a day over 40.
Thank you. But I am.
You look very young for your age, so obviously something's doing you a lot of good. But, with vast psychotherapeutic experience, and you have had a practicing certificate and so on, I think you should apply. We've widened the scope of applications that may be accepted, and I'd apply as soon as possible because, as you can imagine, we're just being inundated, and especially since we made the announcement of, the expansion of our faculty. And people like you were very valuable. Like, I remember our first intake of CPAP, we had people ranging from clinicians in their 20s through to people who were 70 or so. So you won't feel like a fish out of water. In fact, I think, we value the elders, the wisdom keepers of this whole tradition so enormously. Where are you based, Myrna?
I'm based in Sydney.
Okay, wonderful. So please apply. Don't let anything stop you. Age should never be a barrier, neither youth nor seniority. Both are valuable. So thank you very much. Let me just see what other questions there are. Well, is there any other hands raised? We have, what time have we got? We've still got a few more minutes.
Tania, I might come back to your question that you touched on earlier about career paths for women in the psychedelic.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, we are talking about therapists and practitioners and clinicians, but so many of the women in the sipsterhood is what we call our sisterhood. They're very passionate about psychedelics for mental health, for mental wellness. Many of them have had the experience of it themselves, have experienced extreme transformations, and they understand and know the power of these medicines, and they want to get involved. How can I be an agent of change in this space? And I just wanted to encourage everybody that the psychedelic space also needs business strategists, lawyers, virtual assistants, writers, marketers, like you name it. So if you have a field that is not like a clinician or a practitioner or a psychologist or a doctor, there's still a lot of space for you in this area. So again, I would encourage you to get involved in a community like Mind Medicine Australia, Sisters in Psychedelics, and just start having the conversations and finding out where the needs are, what the company, who are the companies, what are the companies, and just remember that whatever your expertise is, it's likely useful in this new industry as well.
Thank you for circling back to that, Dana. I wanted to do that as well. You mentioned everything that I wanted to say. One thing I would add is, if you feel like you're not quite ready to just kind of like jump in with both feet, I think a really safe way to kind of like dip a toe in is just to volunteer for the organizations that are already existing, right? Like those nonprofits, those charities and whatnot, like they need the help. And if you have the skill set that they're looking for, that's the perfect match and perfect way for you to be introduced to it.
I definitely want to echo that point. So a lot of the people who've worked with Mind Medicine Australia in paid roles have started as volunteers. And so I really want to encourage, we're actually looking for volunteers to help us with various projects at the moment. So if you happen to be in Melbourne or Victoria and you want to come and spend a day or two at our office and learn more about this field, then we welcome you. We also have volunteering opportunities with our chapters because our chapters are all volunteer-led, and that's a really wonderful way to get involved in your local chapter and learn about the field more and meet others who know more about the field, and you can become, sisters and brothers with others in your community, which we really encourage as well. And just to learn as much as you can, immerse yourself. Effectively, when Peter and I first were introduced to this field, I completely immersed myself for a number of months before I even had a medicine session, and I became really familiar with what was going on in the field. I read everything. I was still petrified when I had my first session, in fact, with the medicine, and but nevertheless, it was certainly one of the most life-changing, if not the most life-changing experience I've ever had. So I really encourage people to learn as much as they can. Knowledge is power. So you can't watch too many videos or read too many books. And just getting that network of supportive brothers and sisters is really something for all of us to have, no matter what we do, actually. I mean, whether we're in psychedelics or any field, I mean, it's really important in this day and age where I think we're feeling a lot more division and a lot more polarity, a very binary nature in the world at the moment. Not polarity, binary sort of world we're living in, where we try to make people right or wrong for having certain views. We need to really build that understanding. We need to go into the field and meet in that field where there is no right or wrongdoing. That famous quote of, I think, Rumi, out beyond thoughts of right and wrong, let us meet in the field and sort everything out in the field and then come back into our lives. So I really encourage everyone to go into that field to find commonality rather than difference. Yes, let's see what other questions there are in the chat. Okay, says here, sorry. Oh, Danielle, Danielle, do you want to ask your question? I see you sitting there. Do you want to ask your question? Or say anything. You don't have to. I see that you'd love to join chapters and things, and we'd love you too.
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, we can.
It's not coming through your TV.
Yes, I have applied for the CPAC course. I'm hoping to get in, but let's see what happens. But I would love to get involved in a Sydney chapter or connect with other people. I am going to come to Melbourne next week.
That's
so
why I won't do it.
maybe I could
it's like a phone
come
call.
to mind.
Tess, could you
it's like
put
a Zoom phone call? It's not.
Can we put Tess on mute, please, Alan or Nicole? Tess, if you can put your phone on mute, please. Thank you. Sorry about that, Danielle.
That's all right. So yes, I would love to connect. I'm in Sydney, so I'd love to connect with other like-minded sisters, join a chapter, just get more involved in this space. And as you say, find our voices. I
Yeah.
think a lot of us have a lot of passion, but we're not quite sure, you know, how to direct that in the best way. Obviously applying for the course and getting involved, but other ways as well. I'd be interested to meet. I'm very passionate about forming a network of like-minded people that are really keen to help others. That's what drives me, you know, into this space.
No, that's fantastic. And have you had your interview yet for CPAD or not
I
yet?
had it this morning, just before this.
Oh, how did it go?
Good, I think. Yeah, it was lovely to, you know, there's 4 of us on there, so all very passionate people. I understand, you know, I guess the intake will, as you said, you want looking for people for different modalities. Obviously, we need to get the psychiatrists up to speed that are going to be prescribing.
Yes.
I'm actually a pharmacist and a herbalist.
Oh, wonderful.
I have a lot of passion for herbal medicine, so I've seen how well it can work, and a little bit disillusioned with the status quo of pharmaceuticals. So, but yes, I think I'm just really keen to become part of a team, a network of practitioners and passionate individuals that just want to really make a difference. I think we've all seen the effects of depression and anxiety. As you say, it's just a battle we're not winning. And I personally have recently had a family friend's daughter at 19 that took her life. So it's just inspired me even more to become, a facilitator for change. And I'm very excited about that recent downscheduling. And I'm so grateful to your organisation. I've been sitting on your webinars for the last 2 or 3 years and just behind the scenes slowly learning about this space. And I think we really are at the cusp of something very exciting. So thank you for all your amazing passion and work.
No, thank you, Danielle. That means a lot. And it has been a hard 4 years, I've got to say, but it's been it's a great outcome.
Yeah.
And I just want to encourage everyone. There's quite a number of questions here around finding other psychologists or psychiatrists and other clinicians. And one of the real goals of our CPAT course is to form those multidisciplinary teams. And we've seen that through the 6 intakes that we've had so far. So we've trained so far 240 therapists through the training, and that includes psychiatrists, psychologists, psychotherapists, GPs, physicians, social workers, occupational therapists, counsellors, and art therapists, and so on, and I think some pharmacists as well. And it is really, really important, we believe, that those people from all the different disciplines come together and put the patient at the centre. I mean, this is an entirely new way of treating patients. And it's really important that we don't just stay stuck in our silos. So yes, of course, we're seeing a lot of psychiatrists now applying for the training. A lot of them a number have already done the training, but there's lots more who are applying now. And we'll be doing a lot of work to ensure that psychiatrists can become authorised prescribers and can get the training that they need, whilst being supported by all the other clinicians who can sit with the patients and have the time to do so without charging a bomb and making these treatments affordable. So there is a place for everyone in this ecosystem. Don't think that because you're a psychologist or a psychotherapist that there's not. The TGA have certainly clarified that this is not just about psychiatrists doing this on their own. This is very much a team approach, and we are doing everything we can to foster those communities and break down those barriers in what I like to call positive human collisions. You come together with people who are very different from you and you start to find that commonality, that common understanding. So thank you. Corey, did you have a question there? You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. No, I didn't have a question. I was just going to comment on the earlier point, just on the ethical committees that might be in place. So I was curious if people out there had more information on that. That's all.
I mean, obviously, the whole ethical use of these treatments, the ethical organisations that we want to encourage to come into this space is extremely important, Corey, and we'd love to hear more from you. Where are you based?
I'm in Canada, in Ottawa.
Yeah.
And the reason that we're interested here is because one of the first forays into the psychedelic training session, we had an individual who was very obviously predatory. And so we were able to sort of weed it out in that example, but it just lends to more and more of the stories out there of predatory people. And so we're looking at ways of trying to establish within, a very underground, challenging environment, but looking at ways of trying to enhance integrity within the space.
Oh, well, that's very important, Corey. And of course, this is the case with any type of therapy and, patient, not just psychedelic assisted therapies. We see predatory behaviors, right across the therapeutic sphere. And we all need to be very mindful of that and call out those behaviors and ensure that we do foster safety and safe environments, and that we can vouch for people and that there's due diligence being done. And I think, obviously part of the protocols around videoing sessions is very important in that, and also making sure that there's a male and female therapist in the room at all times when people are undergoing these treatments will help ameliorate those sorts of concerns as well. There's a question here from Annalise who says, you moved back to Auckland and there's chapters. Yeah, so Annalise, actually, we're looking for someone to restart or rebuild our chapter in New Zealand because the lady who had built it really well got really sick. So please reach out to us if that's something of interest to you. SIP is looking for virtual volunteers as well. And then we have, let me see if there's any other quick questions before we wrap up. SIP's put the details of their summit in there, which we thank you very much for, ladies, sisters. Is there any other last question before we wrap up? I'm just conscious of the time. We said we'd finish at midday. So if anyone's got any other question, please raise your hand, and you could unmute yourself, not all at the same time though. That would be great. Otherwise, we might just finish with a concluding statement from Dana. And
I was just wondering, Tania, maybe Dana has more to say about the ethic.
Actually, I'm just seeing some questions here. So, Jan, if we could go to you first. I see your question.
Yeah, I'm a GP and work as a psychotherapist. I've been working with ketamine assisted psychotherapy since about 5-6 years ago. And I guess I have a concern about this, promising psychedelic assisted therapy being taken over by the patriarchal, capitalist, kind of deeply entrenched systems of power over, which I see as actually as fundamental to a lot of the trauma that we're trying to treat. So I just wondered if Sisters in Psychedelics, as well as kind of bringing women and creating safe space for women, which is essential, is got any kind of goals or mandate to safeguarding or creating really that new sacred feminine or divine feminine, mother honoring, indigenous kinship kind of system that I think we kind of lost through colonization and, of course, about 2,000 years ago for us Indo-Europeans. So it's a big question, I realize, and thank you for this time that you've all devoted also.
No, it's a really, really important question because, of course, these medicines bring you to a full understanding of the sacred divine feminine, and we need to honor that the sacred nature of these therapies so much. Bea and Dana, does one of you want to respond to that question?
I'm not sure exactly how to respond to it. It's a big question.
It's a huge one, so don't feel under too much pressure. It's a hard question.
I think I can say that B and I are really for ourselves and for our organization, we're really looking into and studying regenerative business models. So looking at reciprocity, looking to our Indigenous leaders here, and really trying to make sure that they're not just brought into our conversations, but that they are actually leading our conversations as the original keepers of the medicine in our traditional lands here in Canada. B, did you want to add anything to that?
The only thing that I would add is, there's been talks recently about if Sisters in Psychedelics would be one of the, I don't know what word to use, like authority in keeping organizations to an ethical standpoint and whatnot. And my reaction to that would be, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work to do. And I don't think that we are the authority on that, right? Like how I see SIP positioned and how I think we want to be moving forward is really a neutral ground. So we are playing with everybody and hoping that everybody will play with us as well. So if, if you can imagine kids playing in a sandbox, just because one child did something they weren't supposed to, or they didn't know was wrong, or so on and so forth, let's have a conversation about it instead of just cancel culture, right? That's what I'd add.
I think by the virtue of the work that we're doing to elevate and celebrate women's voices too, that we're providing a platform for women to rise to leadership positions in organizations across the board and to bring their divine femininity and their ways of doing business in a feminine sense, in that flow nature, the way Mother Nature works, regenerative model can rise to the top just by us providing the platform to elevate these women.
Totally agree. Well, thank you very much. We need to wrap up now, but I want to encourage all of you to stay connected, to support one another, because we are sisters and brothers, all on the same path. And I want to leave you with a quote by Ram Dass, who I was lucky enough to spend a week with in 2018. And one of his sayings was that we're all walking each other home. And I want to encourage you all to walk one another home, to walk on this path together, to find similarities rather than differences. And that when you see difference, don't necessarily think it's wrong or right, just be open and try to find that place in the field that we can all go to and be together and support one another, because, we need to make sure that these treatments are available, that they are given safely and effectively to those who are suffering. There's just too much suffering in this world, and we need to, all of us, reach out our hands and walk those people home so that they can find themselves and they can contribute to this world which needs their contribution. So thank you all. Please do bring lots of people to our next webinar, which is in next week, of course, Robin Carhart-Harris. Quite a different webinar, but nevertheless an absolutely extraordinary, brilliant man who will talk a lot about the incredible research he's done with psilocybin, absolute lead in the field, a wonderful presenter, a wonderful human being. So please bring lots of people to that next week. Spread the word. This recording will go online onto our YouTube channel, and we'll organise a thank you note to go out with some resources for you all, so you can stay in touch, join our chapters. And Sisters in Psychedelics, we thank you for being our sisters and for joining us to celebrate International Women's Day. Both of you are just really lovely human beings and doing a really important service in this world. So
thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank
And an honor.
Thank you all.
Thank
Have
you
a beautiful
very much.
day.